Okay, so this is a document which describes what I'm going to follow through. Again, I think you guys have got it. I'll find it afterwards. But this goes through in a lot of detail all the stuff I'm going to follow now. So, you know, if I lose you during the demonstration, that will be available and it's hopefully fairly easy to understand. If it's not, let me know because I'd like to tidy it up. So, start out by going to clinFHIR.com. And I had expected to have it working a little bit better than this. What's happening to my internet? Is that still working? Oh, wow. Okay. This is running really slowly. I hope it's just because people are hammering the network, but this is the launch page for clinFHIR. So we're going to start out by going to the graph builder, which is that guy right there. Okay, this is potentially going to be painful. All right, so the first thing you do when you go to the graph viewer is to select the event that you're participating in. I set up a track for DevDays, which is down through there, so I can click on that. If you want to, you can click this checkbox and then it will remember and it won't ask you again. But I'll just select that and that takes me into the graph builder. So we're now running the graph builder. So the first thing you need to do is to create your graph. This is the list of graphs that I've already created, a simple problem list and a linked patient. I'll create a new graph by clicking on that plus button there like so. And when I do that, it takes me into this modal dialog here, which lets me select the track that I'm interested in. So the graph builder was intended to sort of work within the context of an event of some sort, like you're training somebody or you're trying to work something out. You can see there are two tracks. There's a consultation track, which has got two scenarios in it, an initial consultation and a follow-up consultation, and a problem list. And the problem list track has got a single scenario called simple problem list, so I select that. And you'll notice that when I do that, the add button appears at the top and I get a little title. I'm going to change the title just to distinguish it from there. So I'm going to say this is the DevDays list. And I click on add. Okay, so I now have a new graph which is currently empty. So this graph display here has got the particular graph I'm working on, the DevDay list in this case. There's some information about the track and the scenario that I'm working on. Over the side here are where I select my conditions. And then in this mode, in this thing in the middle here, is where I get different views of what I'm trying to do. So I'm going to start by adding in a patient, and I'll give them a name, John Doe. The name is really just used for working within the graph, so I can distinguish between different instances. So here is where, by the way, this business of the type and the instance comes into play. So I've got a type of patient, and I've just created a particular instance of patient. I'm going to add a list resource, which is going to be my problem list, like so. And then I'm going to add a condition, which will be asthma, like so. And I'll add another condition there, which is going to be diabetes. Like so. So I've added four instances to my graph so far. Now the most fun way of using this is to use this graph tab down through there, because here is where we'll see those relationships building up. So I'm going to select the graph tab, and at the moment you'll see that I just have 4 disconnected resources instances which tell me nothing. You can zoom this display, by the way. My Mac's got a trackpad. I'm not sure otherwise how you do it. But now what you now do is what I now want to do is I want to connect these resources together. So in particular, I'm going to start with my condition. And I want to be able to say that this condition is for this patient. So that is a reference from condition to patient. So I click on condition, and then down here I have the different elements that can be in a condition. So these are the parts of a condition. These come from the spec, actually. So one of the things about FHIR is that it's all built on the same sort of infrastructure. In New Zealand, we call it eating your own dog food. This is a pretty disgusting expression, but we're New Zealanders, we do that. So when you create a reference, what you do is you select the reference that is the source, rather the resource that is the source, and you then select the target. So I've got my patient, and the patient has got a subject element, and that subject element can be a reference to a patient. In fact, it can be a reference to a patient and to a group. So I'm going to say I want a reference to a patient. The tool says, well, you've already got a patient in your graph. Do you want to link to it? And I'll say, yes, please. And so I now have a reference from condition to patient. And I'll go through and I'll do the same thing for my asthma, and I'll link that to my patient. And I'll go through to the list, and I'll say, yes, I'm going to link my list to the patient as well. So I've now built up my basic problem list. I've started to build my problem list. So I've got two condition resources which are pointing to my patient. I've got my problem list which is also pointing to the patient. What I now want to do is I want to point from my list to my conditions. So I do that by selecting my list resource. You can see I've already got the subject set down through there. Here's all the other things I could set, by the way. If I was interested, I could create an encounter and link that into it. But I won't do that. I've got an entry element. Now, if you go into the specification, you will see that the entry element has got sort of sub-elements as well, one of which is this entry. Entry links to an item. An item links to any kind of resource. So I click on that, and I say I want to add it to asthma. And so I now have a link there to my asthma. And what I want to do now is I want to create another entry, because I've got one entry pointing to my condition. So I click on the plus link like so. I get a new entry. I expand that. I click on there. And I link it to my diabetes. So I've now built my problem list. Now, if you go into the specification, actually, sorry, I shouldn't do that. What you can also, if you want to look up more about what I've just, if you're looking at these things and saying, how the heck do I work this stuff out? How do I know about this? If you go to this list over here, you now see how we're starting to build up the resources there. We've got this little, these references there. You've got this little question mark. That question mark will take you to the specification where it describes the details of this resource. So there are those elements. So if I was to go back to my graph builder, go to my list, there's the definition in the specification of list. And down here, you see there was the list subject, and there was the list entry, which had a reference to to condition. Notice actually that in the specification, the list entry can point to any item, because a list is a fairly generic sort of expression. So there was nothing to stop me, if it made any kind of sense at all, is I could go to my graph. I could add a different resource. If I use a select direct link, this lets me select any kind of resource. So let's create something wild like an observation. Type in OBS, add an observation, say it's observation of a rash. Oops. Like so, add it to my list. Add it to my graph, and we now see that if we go here, we see there's my observation that I've just added. I really should take my observation and say who it's about, so I'll add it into the patient, like so. And then I could go to my list, and I could go down to here. I could create a new entry. I could expand that entry, and I can now point it at my rash. So I've now built up something which looks like that. The tooling won't let you build anything which is invalid in FHIR, but that's all it does. You can build whatever you like. This is actually the whole point of this. Is to be able to sort of play with the resources and to see how they kind of match up. All right, so that's created the resources and it's linked them together. What I now want to do is I now want to put data against those individual resources. So if we go and look, for example, if I go to this condition resource here, like so, you can see that I've added the reference to the subject. If I click on this tab at the top here, saying resource instance, I can see what it actually looks like. So this is the instance on the wire. If you remember that picture I showed you in the previous presentation that had the patient and it had their name and birth date and all of that sort of stuff, that's what it looks like when it's being transferred from one system to another system. I'm going to go back to here, and I'm going to go into the, I'm going to start with the patient. And I'm going to go to the, oh, by the way, if you mouse over the name of the element there, you'll get the full description, again from the spec. So this is all being pulled down from the FHIR specification, okay? So there's no coding of this being done. So if I go into the name, you can see I've got multiple names. That little icon right there lets me add data to the resource. So if I click on that, it knows that it's a human name. So,
David,
yep.
I created a bit.ly link to your exercises.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay.
bit.ly/clinical modeling.
All right. So that's let's go bit.ly/clinical modeling.
Yeah, it needs to be dot in there somewhere. Bit.ly.
Oh, okay. Clinical. 2 L's?
Yeah.
Maybe I should spell that right. So again, I suspect, yeah, there we go. Okay, so that link there, I suspect that I'm going to move fairly quickly through these things just to show you how it works. So that, as I say, that goes into quite a lot of detail. So you might want to look at that and follow on, and thank you for doing that. In the meantime, I go back to my graph builder. Right, so I clicked on the patient, I clicked on this little icon right there. So when I was talking about data types in the previous section, so every element has got a particular data type. The model, which comes from the internal FHIR definition, knows that a name has got a data type of human name, so therefore it brings up a dialog for human name. And I'm going to call this John. I'm going to call him John DevDays. I know I call him John Doe there, but this is so I can find them. If you're doing this, please don't use this name because this is going to get really, really confusing. But I'm going to call this John DevDays. John DevDays, like so. Quite know what's happening there, but anyway, let's have a look at that. I'm going to go and look at my instance. And there we go. So it's now added the name of John DevDays, so that's pretty good. I'm going to go to my condition, and I'm going to, this is diabetes. So if you remember, we talked about coded data and linking coded data to a terminology. So I'm going to go into the code down through here. It's a codable concept. I click on the code element like so. What I now want to do is I want to look up the SNOMED code for asthma. So if I type in ASTHMA, click the search. So what happens now is that this is now searching the terminology server for all of the conditions which have the name of asthma. And it's a SNOMED, so there's the asthma asthma term for the SNOMED term for asthma in there. So I select that, like so, and I can, there we go. So what it's now, it's running a bit slow. I'm not sure what's happening with the network, but so what's happening here is that this is now, it's a SNOMED term for asthma. If you're familiar with SNOMED, you'll know it's a hierarchical ontology, which is a complex way of saying that it's like a tree. And so asthma is a type of disorder of the respiratory system, and it in turn has child elements of brittle asthma, late onset asthma. I can walk up and down the tree if I want to, or I can just select asthma, which is what I will do. So I've now added that. If I look at my instance, we'll now see there is the way that this is represented. And you can see here that there's the code element, which was in the condition, and there is the coding. The coding says that it comes from SNOMED. The code was this, and the display inside of SNOMED was asthma. And I'm just going to go through and add a couple more. So I'm going to go, actually that was diabetes, silly old me. Okay, so I'll go to there, I'll go to there, I'll change it to diabetes. Oops. Diabetes mellitus, and save. I'll go to my asthma, go to my condition, and go and do my asthma lookup, and save. Let's choose Baker's asthma just for fun, to be different. And there's my observation. Now, if you add an element, add a resource, and you change your mind afterwards, that's no big deal. You go to this list tab here. There's the observation. That little icon there will remove it from my graph, which is what I'm going to do. If I wanted to just remove a reference, I could remove it from there. So my graph now looks like that. It's now back to being my simple graph. I have added the patient's name, and I've added a couple of conditions. So I'm now ready to save it to the server. So I go to the server tab. Now, what I can do is I can validate all of this. So there are certain rules inside of FHIR which have to be followed to make valid resources. So, for example, a condition actually has to have a verification status, which I haven't added. So I can be lazy. I can save it like this if I want to, or I can just see how well I'm doing. I can click on this validate all, and what happens now is that it calls a validation operation on the server, and it comes back and it says, okay, so your asthma condition is valid, it's got a tick. My diabetes is valid, it's got a tick, but my list has not. So I'm missing something on my list. And the patient has got a question mark. So, oops, no, it is running slowly. This all runs in the background, so that's why it runs, that's why it's running a bit slowly. So what I can see is that everything's valid except for my list. If I mouse over there, we'll see that I've got a few things missing. I should have a text element, that's just a warning. But I needed to have a status, that's that third one, and I needed to have a mode. So I can fix that. If I select the resource and through here, and you see actually I should have noticed that it was red. Red was required. So I'm going to go into my status. Because status has only got a limited set of values, the tool is able to render it as a radio button rather than as a list to select from. So I'll change that, and I'm going to change the mode to a working list, like so, and I'll do another validate all. Okay, I'm good to go. So everything's now saved. So what I'll do is I'll click on Send to Server. Let's do this. So each resource is now packaged up into a bundle, actually, and sent off to the server, where the server will save it. And when it has saved it, what it will do is it will come back. As I say, the network is running spectacularly slowly at the moment, but it will give me a dialog saying that it's actually saved it. Any questions while we're waiting for the network to behave? Yeah.
I actually didn't understand if this tool actually allows you to really link the resources together and populate the metadata with. Oh, okay, it's not just for.
This is really doing it. Yeah. Well,
okay.
it's supposed to be anyway.
And then for the codable concepts, if you're not using SNOMED but your own ontology or whatever ICD-10, is there an option to?
That's where profiling comes in. So what you do is you create a value set which points to your different ontology. This is following the whatever the binding of the value set is. So it doesn't select you on an ad hoc basis. You create your value set first.
Okay.
Yeah. This is running really slowly. So. Okay, well, I'm going to ask you to trust me that it's actually going to save it behind the scenes and move on to the next phase. What time am I supposed to finish, by the way? How long have I got? Half an hour? Okay. So we'll just. Sorry?
15, 20 more minutes.
I've got 20 minutes left. All right, you're going to have to trust me. Do this. Yeah, I'm a doctor. You can trust me. I would urge you to have a try outside of hours. I'm around here for the rest of the week, so if you do have issues, come and let me know. But what that is supposed to be doing behind the scenes is saving it onto the server. So what I'll now do is I'll now show you the patient viewer, and the patient viewer application down through here. The first thing that you need to do is you need to set your servers to the correct values. You do so by clicking this edit button and selecting the server. In the Let's Build document, I have listed what they should be, which is these ones right down through here. Having done that, I can go to my patient viewer. All right, I can select my patient. Now, I'm just going to see if I'm going to be really lucky, and I'm going to see if DevDays as a patient has come up. Oh, look at that, DevDays patient, it actually did. So it has saved it. This is running really, really slowly. So I'm going to select the patient that I just created and go into there. Okay, it's created 49 encounters. I think this is another patient. All right, so I am going to do something quite different. I'm going to, okay, so this is a problem list that I created earlier. And so here we have, so as I say, this is one I created earlier on while I was testing to make sure that everything worked okay. These are the resource types for this person. Here is the graph, and as you can see, in this particular case, I added a practitioner to indicate the source of this list. So this is saying that this list was created by this practitioner. The document reference is something which is used internally to be able to link the graphs together, so I know what's part of one graph. But you can see here that I've got the same resources that I created in the graph builder. And what I can do is I can select a particular resource. So let's select my asthma resource. And here are the different ways that I can view it. I can view the resource as if it were a tree. So this is kind of like coming out of from the specification. So these are all the different elements on in this resource. There's the JSON view of the resource. There's an XML view of the resource. And here are the references. So this shows that the condition resource has got a reference to patient, and it's got a reference from list. And if I want to, I can say select the list resource and load that, and I can now see the list resource pointing to the patient and to the practitioner. So these are just ways of viewing the data on the FHIR server. But we're now, as I say, looking at the real FHIR server and viewing the data from there. Okay. Any questions about any of that so far?
Is it possible to configure the platform in other server, in my server?
Yep, you can select another server if you want to, sure. What you do is you just go back to here and you can add a new server, like so.
Not add new FHIR server, all clinFHIR platform and download the sources. Is possible?
Download the source of clinFHIR. Yeah, it's available in GitHub. I sort of prefer to find out why you want to, because it's kind of something which is built up over several years. So I'm happy to talk about it, but it's not generally downloaded. Alrighty. So as I say, I'm being a bit, unfortunately, it's not running as smoothly as I would have liked due to our little network issues. But I will nevertheless move on. So that still hasn't saved to the server, so I think we're not going to work. What I now want to do is I've been talking about how to adapt a core resource. So to do that, what we do is we go to clinFHIR and we go to the logical modeler. And the logical modeler allows us to add things to our resource. So to do that, the next time I do this, I'm going to load everything onto my local machine and do it from there, because this is painful. Okay. What's that?
You have one moment? Could you go to the internet settings?
What's that, sir? Good.
Create in hotspots, maybe.
Oh, okay.
If you 1+5 on the way.
That one there?
Yeah, it's probably like 30 megabytes per second.
Let's have a look and see if that
Should be
works a
a lot
bit better. Okay, let's try that.
Otherwise, it might be this website.
Normally runs pretty well. That was 1+5?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, let's just... Oh, let's just try this one from here. All right, well, let's see.
It works.
Let's see if it works. Okay, so we're trying a new network to see if that works. Okay, I'm going to create a new model, which I'm going to call it DD for DevDays condition. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adapt a condition resource. I'm going to say that my base resource is condition, like so. I'm going to call it DD for DevDays condition. I'm going to make sure that no one's already used this, and I'm now going to save it. So now what I have is a model. That model has called down the existing structure of a condition. In fact, I call it condion, but there we go. I'm going to take out stage, because stage, I don't want it. I'm going to get rid of evidence, because I don't want that as well. And I'm going to add in a new element, and I'm going to call it the moon phase, because I want to know what's the phase of the moon when this condition is at its worst, because I'm suspicious that this person is in fact a werewolf. I'm going to call the data type a string. I could call it a codable concept, and I could link this to another value set, and that's where you get your other value sets from. If you've created your value set, you could link to it from here, but you've got to create it separately. I'm going to say that it's an extension, like so. And I'm going to say that the URL of my extension is .com / structure definition / moon phase. Now, in practice, what you would generally do is you would create the extension definition first. It doesn't actually matter. The reason why I'm putting something in here is that this tells the logical modeler, if you like, tells the graph builder that this is an extension. So what I've said is I've created this thing called moon phase. It's the phase of the moon when worst, like so. Oops. Like so. I'll save that. So I now have this new element called moon phase. The value of doing this when it's all working properly, which I assure you it generally does, is that it allows you to sit down with clinical folk and to model the information that they actually want to receive. So let me give you another example of logical models working. So in New Zealand, we're working on for example, there is our patient model that we're building for our registry. So here, for example, we've specified that we've got the NHI, which is our national number. We've taken the name, we're saying that we want to know where the name actually come from. We've said that the source of the name comes from a particular value set. It's a codable concept. I can look at the value set if I want. So these are all the possible value sets that we have defined for the source of the name for the New Zealand registry. We've taken the telecom, we've taken the gender, we've added the source of the birth date and so forth. So what we're able to do, as I say, is we're able to model the information that we want to put in without having to create all the individual artifacts ahead of time. So this is just a more complex one. And you can see that what you can actually do is that if you've set it up with the value sets, you can see the contents of the value sets. And this is coming from the server. So this is showing that the source of the birth date could be any one of these things down through there. So it means that when you're sitting down with clinical folk, you're able to demonstrate where this data actually goes, and then the actual creation of the profiles can be done by experts. So I'll just go back to my condition, which, where was it? Where was my condition? Don't say I... Oh, there it is, okay. All right, so that's the moon phase that I've added. I will save that, like so. So I've now I've updated that. And it creates a URL. So that's the URL there of my model that I have created. So I'm going to take that URL. I'm going to go back to my graph. And in my graph, I'm going to add a new logical model. And I'm going to say that that's the condition I want to use. So that's the DevDays condition. Like so. And I'm going to give it, say, call it DD condition. So when I go into here, if I go to that condition, we now see that I have this moon phase down the bottom. Well, my ordinary conditions don't. So my ordinary conditions only go down to there. But the one I've just created has got moon phase. So what I can do is I can go and I can link it to my patient, like so. I can go into my code, and I can say that the problem is hirsute. I haven't tested that hirsute actually works. Oh, there we go, hirsutism. Okay, so that's the SNOMED code for hirsutism. And I'll save that. And then if we look at my resource instance, we see I've got hirsutism, and I've got the subject down through there. And I can go back to my moon phase, like so, and say that it occurs during the full moon, like so. I would probably, if I was doing this for real, I would probably create a value set for the various phases of the moon, and then I could just select it. And of course that would mean that I don't have any issues with spelling problems. If I now look at my resource instance, we can see that I now have an extension there, and that extension has got the URL that I entered in my model down through there, and it's got the value set down through there. I can then validate that it's correct and complete, and as you can see I'm missing, so it doesn't understand that. So again, this is now working nice and fast, by the way. So what's happened here is I am able to take a resource and I'm able to say, is this valid? And so it actually doesn't look too bad. It's saying that I should have a text element, but I can ignore it. It doesn't understand the extension, and it also didn't understand that SNOMED term. All of those I can ignore. So I can now save that to the server, and let's see if that's going to work a bit better. Still isn't, it's not saving it. But again, hopefully what you can see is how I was able to take a core resource type, I was able to adapt it, and then I was able to use that in the scenario, so I can determine whether or not I've got all the bits that I need in my profile. And what I might just do, I might just refresh this page. Okay, and I'll go back into here. Notice I can go in and I can go out. There's my DevDay problem list. There's my DD condition, so I can go in and out. I'm just going to see if the problem I was facing before, here we go, it hung out. All right, so it came back with an entry. It didn't find that resource, which I didn't take out. So maybe I should go into my problem list, which I will. All right, I'll go to my list. And I've got a subject in there. Yeah, I think it was running so slowly before that it kind of hung up. with a bit of luck, I might be able to go into my, let's go back to patient viewer like so, and I'll see if I can select DevDays. Okay, no, I'm just something not quite right happening there. Okay, so that didn't go quite as smoothly as I would have liked, but hopefully 5 minutes. Okay. So in summary, what the tooling is intended to do is to let you create these customized models and to build instances out of them. There are detailed descriptions in that link. The tool is available for you whenever you like it. If you choose to have a play with it and have issues, give me a shout. I'm around. I'm happy to take any further questions. Okay. If not, I'll make up for running over in the last session by finishing early in this one. Thanks for coming along.